All opinions expressed on any program are those of the producer and or persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of DCTV. All producers and guests appearing on programs provide information and opinions based on information they consider to be reliable. DCTV does not affirm the completeness and accuracy. All DCTV members agree to adhere to DCTV's Statement of Compliance and are participants in a community medium forum where they're exercising their freedom of speech.
Program called the Network of Global Corporate Control. And can you scroll on the teleprompter, please? We're having some problems with our teleprompter. I may have to speak extemporaneously. Okay, here we go. Today's program is called The Powers That Were. That's also the title of a 20-page blog that I tweeted yesterday. We'll talk later about what's happening with the group that thought they could dominate us. Thank you to DCTV, and I'd like to give you some background. DCTV is a public access network. When the law for cable TV was passed in 1972, the citizens fought very hard and won the right to allow the public to tell their stories alongside the cable TV companies. Carmen Stanley, project director, Mo Jackson, studio director, and Carmen is also doing audio and teleprompter. They've been helping me to tell my story. I'm going to give you some background information. I used this introduction in the program on February 16th, 2016. My audience has been growing since then. I represent 189 ministers of finance and development on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. This is located in Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, the World Bank is Washington, D.C.'s biggest employer. The World Bank and International Monetary Fund were created in 1944 at the end of World War II. The World Bank and IMF are very special organizations. The World Bank and IMF are also called the Bretton Woods Institutions, named for the ski resort in New Hampshire where 44 nations met and put the ministers of finance in charge of the world's wealth. They kept it secret that that is what they were doing because they intended to bring all of the world's hidden wealth out after 50 years. That is what we're going to do. We're converting the world's paper money to money minted out of the world's hidden gold reserves. The Board of Governors agreed to do this since the 12th of April, 2014. How do the people who rule the world do this? They do it through corporations which don't have to tell you who owns them or who they really are. The Dutch East India Company was established in 1602. It was the second corporation in the world. The first corporation was the British East India Company. The world's corporations are really just one corporation, and they've been creating corporations out of the world's countries and even their governments and their cities and towns. They've even been creating corporations out of the world's people. When babies are born, they set up a company and give that company the name of the baby. And then they estimate how much taxes that baby is going to pay over its lifetime. And then they create a bond and float that bond on the world's capital markets and earn money on the bond. In Switzerland in 2011, 3 mathematicians, Vitali, Glatfelder, and Battiston of ETH Zurich, showed the existence of the network of global corporate control. But you see, people are really more than they appear at first blush. We're going to learn who we really are and what we're really capable of doing in the global currency reset. I'm just an ordinary person, but luckily for everyone who's working with me, and that's everybody, I'm extremely stubborn and I'm extremely transparent. That's a nice way of saying that I'm a blabbermouth. I've always been that way. Now we're going to talk about reality. One reason I like to show you what I've said in the past is to establish accountability for who knew what, when. Yes, the public is accountable for knowing about the corruption I've been exposing on DCTV. The last segment was called Red Pill for that very reason. I'm going to remind you that people who take a red pill embrace the sometimes painful truth of reality. I've been telling you for some time that we're all in a reality that's different from what you've been hearing in the press and learning about in the universities. This difference comes from the fact that the one corporation owns the news outlets and uses the tenure system to prevent universities from teaching the truth. The one corporation also bribes or threatens the politicians and tries to hide its influence. That system has broken down largely because of the wealth of the world that was set aside in the Bretton Woods institutions at the end of World War II. As a whistleblower from the World Bank, I've been working to fight this corruption for a very long time, and I'm working with the world's military powers who are depending on the world's wealth. I want to show you why Christine Lagarde is now bankrupt under a lien that I placed on her assets in Chicago. I also put a lien on Barack Obama's house, and I put a lien on the assets of the Secretary of State of Illinois. This is the envelope that Jesse White, the Secretary of State of Illinois, used to mail me a letter threatening to throw me in jail if I didn't remove the lien on his and Christine Lagarde's and Barack Obama's assets. I posted the letter from the Secretary of State of Illinois on the internet, and now I'm going to read you from his letter to me. Please be advised that Section 9501.1 of the UCC provides for both criminal and civil sanctions for communicating false records to the filing office. You are hereby directed to cease and desist from submitting non-conforming UCC documents with the Office of the Illinois Secretary of State. Continued attempts to file these documents will result in referral to the appropriate law enforcement personnel for prosecution. Jesse White, the commercial liens on your and Christine Lagarde's and Barack Obama's assets are valid. What's more, the lien that I placed on the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago is also valid. All of the countries of the world told Jesse White that he had no business trying to invalidate that lien. I have linked the letter where I told Jesse White this when I cleared that letter with all of the countries of the world. I cleared this letter with the countries of the world when I offered to mint currencies from the world's monetary gold reserves in a global currency reset. The Board of Governors informed the Secretary of State for Illinois that Jesse White had no standing to question the board's decision that the Fed will be required to offset country debt with the debt that the Fed owes on its Treaty of Versailles bonds. The Fed, together with other private central banks, is bankrupt. The Board of Governors is avoiding an otherwise certain currency war by deploying the gold in the global debt facility for currencies issued by each of the countries. Legal tender laws are going to be rescinded so that local currencies in villages can create full employment and fuel growth. What's been happening since March 2015? when Jesse White illegally removed the lien on the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, the Fed moved to Chicago. Jesse White refused to answer the complaint about his illegal removal of the lien on the Fed, and on September 20th, 2015, the Global Debt Facility placed a commercial lien on Jesse White's property. That's what he's been trying to remove. You can find out what else has been happening by reviewing the archives for this DCTV series. I upload them in YouTube. I also provide frequent updates in my other social media. And there was another failed attempt to steal the world's assets. We're now going to talk about the group that thought they could dominate us. We've been devoting this series on the network of global corporate control to this group. The network of global corporate control is directed by the black nobility descended from the pharaonic bloodline families. This group has met their match. The fact that you don't hear much about these developments is because these crooks try to remain hidden. Their efforts to hide aren't working for them. Every time they break one of the links to the documents I post, this shows what it is that they're trying to hide. Let's talk about Christine Lagarde. Christine Lagarde tried to steal the world's assets that were deposited in the Global Debt Facility in the Bretton Woods institutions at the end of World War II. All of the powers of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are in the Board of Governors. Christine Lagarde attended the signing ceremony for a galactic agreement on January 24, 2016 that had not been authorized by the Board of Governors, and she was therefore fired. She was fired as managing director of the IMF because she exceeded her authority. Yesterday, I posted the blog where I had invalidated the Galactic Agreement. The blog is at the end of the teleprompter. In that blog, the link to the article on the Galactic Agreement was cut. That's not a problem. You can hear about Christine Lagarde and the Galactic Agreement from this recording, and there's an outro.
Pope Francis signed off on what is being called a binding galactic agreement this past Sunday inside the walls of the Vatican, witnessed by Christine Lagarde and legal counsel of the IMF. Former USA, Incorporated President Barack Obama will soon be revealed as a Rome, CIA operative, and publicly be made to relinquish presidential status, and be amnestied to a foreign country, Dubai. It is rumored. Privately, Obama's resignation has already occurred and he's just awaiting a public dismissal announcement. Also the United States Congress, including all members of the Senate and
that caused her to be fired. The banking cartel tries to intimidate me. One Twitter account named Mountain Lover 90 asked if I'm really going after them, meaning if I'm going after the banking cartel, I suppose. And if I'm doing this, why I and my family are still alive. I just noticed that the link to my response was broken. So I'm giving you my response now, and I'll give you another link in the teleprompter. As for Mountain Lover's argument that the banking cartel can kill anyone they choose to, we have already, I hope, learned that the banking cartel is not in charge of reality, and that they don't own the world's wealth. The banking cartel is bankrupt and is getting wound down in the Global Debt Facility. Christine Lagarde, Jesse White, and Barack Obama, who thought they were going to stay protected, we've already seen are scrambling. There's going to be a lot more of that before we're done. The question often comes up why we're not making faster progress. I like the response from some of the people in my social media to this question. They want to know what the person who's asking why it's taking so long is doing themselves to help us move things along. This is a very good response because we're all in this together. At the end of this segment, I'm going to talk about what people can do. Now I want to talk about communications. As some of the avenues for communication break down, others open up. What's breaking down? I used to be able to contact my followers directly with my updates. Now my followers must check for themselves to follow developments. I used to be able to post on Internet Archive, and now I can't. What's opening up? My contact with the Coalition for the Rule of Law, as I call us. The coalition consists of the world's military powers and anyone else who wants to join us. For example, last week, someone from the coalition put the business card for Malawi's Minister of Finance, His Excellency Goodall Gondwe, on my desk. And let me show you. This is the card. I used to have his card because I met with him in 2015, but all of my business cards were stolen from my home office a couple of years ago. So this card, I don't know who gave it to me. But I was able to call and mail His Excellency Gondwe after discovering his card. And I reported this contact last week and I tweeted it. I said in my tweet, eventually all of the member countries of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are going to conclude monetary agreements with the Global Debt Facility, and also non-member countries such as Taiwan and North Korea. The rest of the coalition are in contact with the network of global corporate control, whether or not they're aware that they're under surveillance. The network of global corporate control's capacity to monitor us is breaking down as more and more of us become aware and start to resist. I like to track my progress in becoming aware of the degree of corruption and what I've referred to as state capture. When I post old documents, I try to help people see how my level of awareness has progressed. It's actually a lot more corrupt than I thought in the beginning. We're now in a reality where we control the world's wealth. There's nothing that the banking cartel can do to regain the world's wealth. The real challenge now is for those of us who know what reality is to keep people who are still duped by the banking cartel from destabilizing things. And I'm going to tell you what you can do to help in the global currency reset. You have to be aware of what's going on around you and develop your critical thinking skills. You should join a group of relatives and friends who know you and can help you figure out when you're acting out of character. And you should also work on local currencies. Now let's see how much more time I have. We're actually making quite good progress because some of the friends that used to be very subjected to mind control, and I've known them for years, are now suddenly able to see what I've been telling them. And many of the members of my family, likewise, they're now opening up. I think this is because as more and more people become aware, there are just so many people at the disposal of the banking cartel, and they have to work this very sophisticated mind control machinery. Well, they can't train it on everybody all the time, and they like to figure out who are the people that are the most aware and try to attack them with their technology. So I've noticed also many times it's been rather difficult for me to post things. I'll start writing something and then I'll get distracted, or something I think that the banking cartel has done will distract me, or something will disappear from my screen because in my PC I've got at least 17 people hacking me. I once had somebody check things out. But in any event, I'm now able to work a lot more concentrated. And one of the things I've told you, one of the ways that you can do to strengthen your concentration capacity is music. And just this past weekend, I was in a concert, and one of my old friends, she was attacked by mind control right in the middle of the concert. Things that she had done perfectly a couple of weeks before were difficult for her. That's what happens when you get into a group of friends. They notice when you're acting out of character, and they can help you signal these things. It's very important. Also, when people are working together in a group, then the ones that are deciding who is a targeted individual, they don't like to work with people in groups, so they're going to probably skip over you. That's one of the things that you can do. But the most important thing is to develop your critical thinking skills. And this is easier said than done. What is critical thinking skills? It's your ability to think logically. And that's also one of the reasons that we're not making faster progress in taking down the banking cartel. But the fact is, we're making a lot of progress. And one of the things that I'm going to be talking about next week, I might as well mention right now, there are offers that the banking cartel is making to people who sign up, that they will receive a monthly income. Now, why do you suppose the banking cartel is making these offers? It's because there are a lot of people that are becoming aware, and they're trying to keep that from growing. Now, I wouldn't recommend that you take that offer. It's just like the Treasury Direct accounts that were on offer before. You can't trust the banking cartel to deliver anything. And just imagine, this is something like critical thinking skills. Think forward what this would mean if we don't have a global currency reset. The chances are, if we don't have a global currency reset, that there's going to be World War III. And the reason that I know this is because of the military's, it's called a power transition model. I was in touch with the political scientist who developed this model for the Department of Defense. I actually went to Ghana with him, and we modeled one of the laws that the Ghanaians were supposed to pass. That was in a loan agreement. I used to be the country lawyer for Ghana. I was also the country lawyer for Nigeria. I was the country lawyer for Yemen. And I was the country lawyer for the Philippines. That was where I really learned a lot. It was Ibrahim Shihada, who was the general counsel of the World Bank at the time, who was reassigning me. And one of the reasons that I was being reassigned was because I kept discovering corruption in all the countries, and they didn't want me to continue to work on countries when I discovered corruption, so they would reassign me. One of the few times I ever went to ask Ibrahim Shihada for a favor was when I was reassigned from the Middle East to the Philippines. I didn't understand that the Philippines had a very major role in the global debt facility. I think that may also have been one of the reasons that I was being assigned to the Philippines. But what happened when I was assigned to the Philippines was I was involved in a banking project, and I discovered corruption there, and the bank ended up failing, and people withdrew their deposits from that bank. And of course, the man who owned the bank was corrupt, and when he started buying employee shares, that meant that our conditions for the loan were not going to be met. And I went to the decision meeting where we were supposed to decide whether or not to disperse that loan. By that time, I had been reassigned to Africa, but I went to the decision meeting anyway, and I said, no, you haven't satisfied the conditions. And I was pretty vocal, and I said I was going to tell the Board of Executive Directors that they were dispersing loans when the conditions hadn't been met. And so they didn't disperse the loan. They had to cancel the loan. And that was when the bank failed. And it failed. The government had to bail out the bank for $500 million. So when the World Bank evaluated that project, they said, oh, well, it was actually satisfactory on balance because the World Bank couldn't have predicted what was going to go wrong. And so I wrote a memo saying, well, of course we could have predicted what was going to go wrong because the whole place was corrupt. And I warned people about it. And therefore, when I was reassigned, that showed that we really hadn't performed satisfactorily at all. There was $900 million worth of poor loan performance. That's not a satisfactory project. And when the report to the executive directors was not corrected, that was a cover-up in the bank. You can't have a cover-up in a bank because that means that the money's going the wrong way. So I went and first I tried to get people to correct this. And then when it wasn't corrected, I went to the U.S. Congress, and Senator Lugar kept asking questions, and he ultimately asked for a GAO inquiry into the lack of accountability at the World Bank and said that he wasn't going to disperse any money until whistleblowers were not retaliated against. And of course, I was a poster child for that. So this is a rather long digression, but in making all of this commotion, that was when I started to get wind of the fact that there was a lot of corruption going on in the World Bank. And so when the Department of Defense came to me with this power transition model that I tested in Ghana, that was when I realized that we were supposed to win. That was what the model was showing, that if we just kept working on the problem, we were going to win. And I was expecting for the corruption in the World Bank to resolve itself. And it turned out that it wasn't just the corruption at the World Bank. It was actually world corruption. But in making such a commotion at the World Bank, and I would go and complain to all the executive directors, and that's how they got to know me. And they figured, well, this is a lady who, you know, she's a pretty tough character, and let's give her a role with the world's wealth. And I got to know the board very well. They got to know me very well. And I just kept on going, and I've never stopped. And the problem, as you see, has snowballed. And because I know about this power transition model, which is 90 to 95% accurate, well, we're poised to win. So you really shouldn't accept any offers from the banking cartel because they're going to lose. The chances that they lose are 95%. And this power transition model has been tested in the Department of Defense. What I'm going to be talking about next week are some of the letters, and I'm going to post them, some of the letters that I have with the Department of Defense and with the people that were developing that model for the Department of Defense. So in summary, our chances of winning are brilliant, and you wouldn't want to choose a losing side, especially when the people that are offering you something are not trustworthy. They're not going to give you what you want because they don't have the world's wealth. We do. It's at the World Bank. It was deposited in the World Bank. Jesse White, the Secretary of State of Illinois, is bankrupt, and so is Barack Obama and Christine Lagarde. I've disclosed Jesse White's hollow threats. The Minister of Finance in Malawi can lead his country in negotiating their monetary agreement to enable the people in Malawi to exchange corrupt paper currency in a global currency reset. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudes.